Well, Anneka, I wanted to start off by saying something important because I think a lot of people, when they hear recognized, they think something like, "Oh, yeah, charms that support good causes." Yeah, I get it. But recognized is so much more than that, and I thought it's really important. Maybe you can explain to everybody what is the power of recognition.
Great question. Well, I think to understand the power of recognition, you really have to understand first what recognition is. And our working definition of recognition, oh, that rhymes, is that recognition is about being seen for who you are, for what you bring, and the experiences in life that you faced or that you're facing. And that definition came about through a report that we commissioned last year as a brand called the Age of Recognition Report. And that report looked at the definition of recognition in today's society, why meaningful connections are so important, and really providing guidance on how we can all live a more thoughtful life, how we can give recognition to people around us. And the biggest thing that came out of that report was that the power of recognition is to help people feel less alone. And we found that almost half of the UK, in fact, over half of the UK in the last year have felt alone.
Right.
That's huge. It's half of this room, half of the UK, and really that is the power of recognition. It's the most fundamental ingredient for solidarity.
Yeah.
And when you have a society made up of people that feel alone, that's a really big problem. And so as a brand, that is really what we're trying to do. So back to your question, is it more than jewelry? It really is. And we spoke to over 100,000 customers in retail stores last year. And just to break that down for people, when you think of jewelry and recognition, what does that all mean? Behind every person we speak to, there's a story. And so just to give you an example, in one of our pop-ups last year, I was actually there, so this is one of my stories, but there's so many of these stories from our ambassador network. And a woman came by the pop-up, and I talked her through the causes, and I said, this is for, this one's for mental health. And she just started crying and walked away. And an hour later, she came back and she pulled me to the side and she said, I lost my son to suicide last year. And she said that he was 28 and he had 2 young children. And, I guess what we do as recognizers, we hold space for people and their stories. And she ended up buying what I'm wearing, which is our mental health dove, with our bangle, and she came back from the till and she said, "Thank you for reminding me that there's so much hope amidst my pain.
Right.
This experience is it's changed my life."
So as you guys can see, a lot more than a charm bracelet.
Yeah.
So Anneka, and I think it's what you're talking about is so deep and important, and I'm sure people are wondering, what brought you onto the path of founding Recognize? What was the inspiration for you?
Yeah, I suppose it's slightly unusual. I actually had a dream. So when I was at university, gosh, I feel like 7-8 years ago, like as you go up in your 20s, you suddenly get older. You're like, wow, that wasn't like 3 years ago anymore. It's actually like 7 years ago or something. But I was home for the Christmas holidays, and I literally went to bed one night and I had this dream. And in my dream, I saw a woman who had depression walking into a supermarket. And at the till point, she saw another woman wearing a bracelet that had a dove on. And I saw the words, "I stand with you." And in that moment, the woman didn't feel as alone and had this moment of recognition in realizing that she wasn't the only one. And isn't that so true about our lives and what we go through? We're never the only one. And so I went back to university that term. Loads of my friends started talking to me about their mental health. And 7 years ago, everyone would talk about their mental health only after they kind of come through their mental health. And so, thank goodness a lot's changed today.
Right.
But back then it was, you got to conquer it before you talk about it. And I think one of my best friends came up to me and said, "Anneka, I've just had depression for 3 months." And that's when it really clicked to me that myself and so many others were really struggling in silence. And it got me thinking about the dream. And I thought, maybe there is something that you could wear that could give recognition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you as I mentioned, you were on our second cohort, and that was in spring of 2019. And after finishing the accelerator, you raised some capital, you got your stand ready, and I think you went to the Spirit of Christmas Fair. And tell us what happened at the Spirit of Christmas.
So I went off at Spirit of Christmas Fair to the toilet, and And if anyone's ever done a show, oh my goodness, that you really do stand up all day and you get really tired. So I genuinely was like, I was just sat on the loo just to like rest my legs. Anyway, so 10 minutes later, I come back to the stand. And one of our ambassadors is like, Anneka, you have no idea who's just been here. I was like, oh my gosh, who's just been here? And she says, John Lewis has just been here. So I'm like, for goodness sake, why was I on the loo? Like, oh my gosh. Anyway, so they sent back another buyer the next day, which I think in my mind, I just knew it was quite serious. Like, why send someone back if you're not interested? And I spent half an hour with this buyer telling her all about Recognised. And within 2 days, we were in their head office speaking to them about launching our brand nationally with John Lewis. And I think we prepared for every question, but what do you want? Isn't it so funny? I think we often underestimate our worth as founders, and sometimes we get in front of really big brands like John Lewis, and suddenly it's like, oh my gosh, but actually I think you forget how much value, particularly purpose-driven brands have for businesses like that. And so, I think within 2 weeks we hosted our first ever pop-up with them. It was the first ever pop-up in the history of John Lewis in their flagship Peter Jones. Right. And we sold 5 times more than any other jewelry brand has ever
so I remember that. I remember visiting. That was amazing. It's like incredible. And that was Christmas in 2019. And so 2020 dawns. And you are in talks with John Lewis about a national tour, about going to all of their stores. And then COVID hits. And everything's canceled. So what do you do then?
So, COVID really got in the way of a lot of things, didn't it? I remember actually it's very clearly because we'd literally launched our national tour, and we were back in Peter Jones, the first store that we'd ever popped up, and we started the tour there because where else would we start the tour? And we were supposed to go around all of their stores. And I remember literally, it was by the hour, wasn't it, that the news changed, and then we were, packing down everything, and it was just this most bizarre experience. And then I think you guys kicked us out of the office as well within 24 hours. So we packed down a pop-up and then had to go over to Liverpool Street.
We were getting kicked out too. We all got kicked out.
And do you know what? Here's a cool.
You got kicked out too.
I'm not actually answering the question, but this is just cool. It's coming to my mind now. But I remember we used to fulfill our orders in a Narnia cupboard. It was like this crappy little cupboard connected to the room, and it connected to your office, JP. And I would go in, and honestly, the whole room was like this big. And I remember taking everything apart, and I remember shutting the door behind me and thinking, I wonder what the next few months hold for us. What does the next year hold? And no one knew. But what we ended up doing is, I think for us, we were thinking, oh my goodness, is anyone going to be buying jewelry right now? We have an average price point of about £100. It's something that you do need disposable income for. And so we came up with another idea to advance our mission, which is to help the majority of people feel recognised.
Right.
And we came up with chocolate. So we launched a viral chocolate bar campaign. Well, it wasn't viral to begin with, but then it went viral. And we basically said to the British public, who do you want to recognise and why? And all they had to do was comment on our Instagram post, tag someone and say, I want to recognise this person and why. And before we knew it, we literally had essays from people saying, I want to recognise my friend at home who's been furloughed. I want to recognise my mum who's on the front line and, it's been really hard for her and la, la, la. Anyway, when they recognised them, we got in touch directly. Like each person we did this for, we got in touch with thousands of people, and we asked them what their favourite chocolate bar was. And then we sent to them, I wish I had a photo, we sent them in the post their favourite chocolate bar with a card that said, feel recognised. And on the back it said, you have been recognised, know how hugely valued and appreciated you are. We're going to get through this. And, something as simple as a chocolate bar was that recognition that people needed. And it changes people's day. And I think that was the beginning of realising that recognition is so much greater than just jewelry. It really is just a vehicle that we can use to help show people love.
And you've mentioned a few things already. Obviously, Recognised has had some great success. You've sold easily over £500,000 of jewelry, and but you've also had, as you've described, some really difficult challenges. As a founder, maybe you could share with us, how do you stay resilient when you kind of keep having these real big challenges, and how do you keep going at it for the next new challenge?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned over the last 3 years is that as a founder of a startup, your ability to continue and your will to keep going and pushing forward is arguably the most precious resource to your startup. And ultimately, I think that's where, rubber hits the road, and that's why resilience is so important, because if you're not in it, who's going to advance what you're trying to do at that stage? And so, I think, did you ask about retail or just resilience in general?
Resilience,
yeah. Well, I mean, I practice it in a few ways. So for me, the first thing is about mindset. I often think with resilience, it's a lot more about what's going on within you than what's going on around you. And so obviously, I mean, retail business in the pandemic has been something to really, you have to be resilient for.
Right.
But I think my first thing is mindset. And so, your mental health, your physical health, it has to be so sharp, because that's where your decision making comes from, and that's where your resilience comes from. And I think a lot of founders have to learn the hard way that their wellness is more important than what they do. And I've learned that the hard way. I got pretty much burnt out by the start of 2021. And you just have to take those moments and think, actually, business is about staying in it as long as you can to advance what you want to do. And so what's the point if you can't stay in it?
Exactly.
So I think that's one way. I think the second way is finding your champions who are going to believe in you more than you might believe in yourself. And so I have one of my best friends also runs a business. And often when we're both having like these really crap days, we'll call each other and it'll be like, you can do this, like, get back up there. Like, and also they're the people that remind you what you need to be reminded of. They're the people who are like, what are you talking about? Like, you did this year. Like, look how far you've come. And then you can get back in the ring.
Right.
I think the third thing is purpose.
Right.
Purpose drives your fulfillment, which drives your resilience. If you don't have a reason that you're getting up in the morning, then I just don't know how I would do it.
Okay.
Stories like the woman I told before, it's those moments. I mean, it's been really hard. It's been really hard.
Absolutely.
This year has been the most brutal year for retail, but particularly for our business. It's been so hard. And actually having those moments where you think, I'm actually doing it for the Dylans of the world and the Judys and all these names that you meet. And everyone will have a reason for their why and the reason they get up in the morning.
Right.
But that is the thing.
Right, so thank you for that, Anneka. Tell my last question. Can you tell us what's next for Recognized?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are discovering creative ways to motivate people towards acts of compassion and to help people show love and give recognition. And so, taking, like we did with jewellery, like we did with chocolate, we're really expanding into other product categories, taking the concept of recognition to become the most meaningful gifting brand in the world. And that's what we're doing. And we're currently raising funding for that, so we're looking for investors. And that's our big focus right now. Yeah.
Thank you. Can we give a big round of applause to Anneka?